I used a copying ability to turn the tables and kill all the female leaders on the Doomsday train, armed myself with their weapons, ultimately took control of the carriage and managed to start the system, resetting the world and becoming the only awakened one, when I was thrown onto this train. It was already dark. The compartment was full of girls. They wore military uniforms, carried guns, and their eyes were as sharp as hunters tracking prey. I was the only man without a weapon, and the only one in ordinary jeans and a jacket. They made me stand against the wall, and even pointed a gun at my head. "Where did you come from?" a voice asked coldly. I looked up and saw a woman in a black tactical vest, Michelle Allard, who was the leader of this group of female fighters. Her gaze was like a blade, staring straight at me as if I were a threat. I waved my hand, feigning innocence. I was just passing through. I thought she'd let me go, but she laughed. And that laugh made me uneasy. She said, "Everyone in this carriage is already here. You came too late. Someone's warning has already been sent out. I don't even know what this thing is." I hadn't finished speaking when there was a loud bang in the carriage. The carriage door was blown open, and a group of people burst in carrying weapons. I was stunned. These people weren't them, but another group of guys, just as well equipped and just as predatory. "Who allowed you to board?" a voice shouted. This time it was a girl named Laura Dempsey who spoke. She looked furious and was holding a shotgun. She seemed to lump me together with the group of girls, even though I had never seen her before. "Fuck. Why are there so many armed people on this train?" I muttered, my mind in chaos. That night, trapped in this carriage, listening to the gunfire and shouting outside, I felt like I had been stuffed into a den of wolves. Then someone tapped my shoulder. It was Ava Miller, a mysterious girl who had been watching me in the carriage for days. She whispered, "Don't move. The system has already started loading." I thought she was joking, but she pointed the gun at me and my heart shot up into my throat. She sneered, "System, activate now." Before I could react, everything went black and a flood of code and commands surged into my head like a thunderstorm, nearly making me faint. When I opened my eyes, everything around me was different. My clothes had turned into a jacket that looked like a military uniform, and I was holding a shotgun. "Oh, the boss," I murmured. Ava looked at me strangely, as if checking whether I was crazy. She said, "You want to stay alive? Then don't move." I nodded, but an involuntary smile spread across my face. I no longer had to worry about being seen as a pitiable drowned rat. I had become one of them, a man who could replicate things and survive. It was an unusual journey, but at least I was the only one surviving on this doomsday train under the identity of a man. When I woke up, I found myself sitting on the carriage floor, surrounded by a ring of glowing boxes, each labeled with a number. This was arranged by Michelle Allard. She had said before that each girl would be assigned a survival pack. What surprised me, though, was that the label on my box read CP01, Psychic. I whispered. Ava walked over, her eyes carrying a hint of appraisal and a touch of impatience. She said nothing, merely clipped the gun back to her belt and handed me a tablet. I looked and saw a screen scrolling with a pile of text records of what I had just experienced. "What is this thing?" I asked as I flipped through the screen. "This is your system," she said softly, her tone like she was revealing a world-shattering secret. "It can duplicate anything on you, as long as you can get hold of it." I blinked. "If I get one thing, I can copy it into another. Don't be scared," she said with a laugh, though the smile made me think she didn't really believe I was foolish. "Whatever you obtain, you can copy. You can even copy another guy's body." I stared at her but said, "Were you sneering just now?" She shrugged. "I was wondering whether you'd actually do what I said." I felt a little annoyed, but her tone made it clear she was testing me. I didn't say much else. I just put the tablet away and muttered under my breath, "Sounds impressive." Michelle walked over and stood opposite me, arms folded, wearing an expression that said, "Don't waste time," she said. "We're on this train. We don't want to waste time on some strange newcomer." I hurriedly nodded. "I won't waste time, big sis," she snorted coldly. "You better not screw this up." At that moment, a commotion suddenly broke out in the carriage. A girl screamed as she ran in from the doorway, holding a piece of paper. Her voice trembled with fear. They found us." When I looked up, I saw her pointing at the carriage in the distance, where the lights suddenly became blinding and ominous. Michelle stood up immediately, her eyes sharpening. She said, "Damn, they're the real enemy. They're agents like us." "Then stop talking," I said, patting the gun on my shoulder. "We need to hide first." Ava frowned at that moment and said softly, "System, can you replicate their gear?" "Depends." I sighed. "I need to find their weapons first." A few minutes later, the group had already rushed into the carriage. They were all dressed in black, well equipped, their eyes as sharp as hunters. Michelle and Ava immediately moved to meet them and the fight broke out. I hid in a corner, watching it all, my mind racing. "You're not seriously planning to hide, are you?" Ava suddenly spoke, a hint of mocking smile on her face. "I know I'm an odd one out in this carriage," I said, "but I'm not planning to be a target either." She shrugged and didn't say anything more, just stood silently by. Her words made it clear she didn't trust me. But she wasn't going to throw me out either. The fight ended quickly. The group was beaten into a sorry state, leaving only a few corpses. Michelle stood amid the rubble, looking at us with complicated eyes. You know a bit of tactics, shoot. Don't spray. I nodded. At home I'm a caretaker. I don't have that many tactics. She smiled. A smile that made me feel relaxed. Sounds like you're a decent fellow. If you're not planning to kill me, then I'd like to get to know you, I said. Deliberately provoking. She ignored my words and only ordered everyone to organize their gear. I picked up a piece of clothing that looked like a military uniform and tried it on. The garment surprisingly adjusted itself to my body and carried a sharp metallic scent. Ava walked over, and I noticed a change in the way she looked at me. She said softly, "Do you really think the things this system gives you are usable?" I tried. I smiled. "They're somewhat useful." "That's good," she said. "Don't expect it to solve every problem." I nodded, but began to make plans in my head. If this system can duplicate equipment, then maybe I can find some advantage in the chaos. This car is a microcosm of the apocalypse, not just a means of transport. It could be a key to some forgotten truth. We began packing our things. Ava put her weapon into a box, while I stowed away my jacket and shotgun. Michelle came over, a hint of doubt in her eyes as if she were assessing my capabilities. "You're actually stronger than you think," she said. "That's because I have a system." I grinned. She didn't argue, just nodded. I felt her attitude toward me starting to soften, though she still remained on guard, but I knew this was only the beginning. On this train full of girls, I wasn't just an ordinary man, I was someone chosen by the system. Maybe I was the true protagonist of this apocalypse. The train hadn't stopped yet, and we had to prepare to act. Michelle made it clear this was the Doomsday Train, a train specifically transporting survivors to some safe zone, though nobody could say for sure whether there was anything there. We were locked in this carriage like birds in a cage, ready to be breached by enemies outside at any moment. "You bunch of idiots," I said, patting my thigh. "Who runs this damn train?" No one answered me. Only the metallic clatter of weapon magazines and guns. Ava walked over, holding something that looked like a tactical jacket. She stood opposite me, eyes sharp. "You're the first person who can duplicate the system. This vehicle isn't just transporting people, it's transporting something." I nodded. "Then I'll duplicate my jacket now. See if it works." She said nothing, just stared at me, as if studying my reaction. I didn't have time to trade barbs with women like them. I was a ticking time bomb, no one knew what the next second would bring. When I typed duplicate jacket into the system, I instantly felt as if a ton of cement had been poured into me. Then a brand new jacket that looked like military gear appeared in my hands. I tried it on and suddenly noticed the gazes around me shift in a strange way. Not only was I wearing military clothing, but the weapons on me also seemed to handle more naturally than others. "This is my system," I couldn't help saying. "It makes me less stupid." Michelle came over, glanced at me, and frowned. "You're just giving yourself an excuse to back out." "I'm not looking for an excuse to back out. I'm looking for a chance to survive." I lifted my chin. "We're in this car not to sightsee, but to find a way out." Another burst of gunfire came from outside. A distant carriage suddenly exploded open. Several people fell to the ground, faces covered in blood. Michelle reacted immediately. She wouldn't let anyone slack off. Not even Ava. "You're not allowed to slack off either," she said coldly, her tone devoid of any feeling. I waved my hand. "I'm not here to slack off, I'm here to stay alive." Ava took the jacket from my hands without a word, inspected it carefully for a moment, then put it back in her backpack. Her gaze seemed to be making an assessment, but she showed no hostility toward me. "You're stronger than I imagined," she said suddenly in a low voice. I froze. That sentence felt like it was sending some kind of signal. I smiled and said, "You mean I might not be a loser?" "You cannot be a loser," she said, biting her lip. "But don't think you'll last long in this car." I shrugged. "I don't care either way. This ride's going to end sooner or later." But I hadn't expected things to be far more complicated than I thought. When I unlocked the copy function in the system, I found I could not only copy clothes, but also other things like firearms, gear, even other guys' limbs. "I'll try again," I said as I shoved the gun into the system. "This time copy it out and see." Ava looked at me, a flicker of surprise crossing her face, but she said nothing. As I met her eyes, I suddenly realized I wasn't just any new arrival, I was someone who could change the rules. When the system finished copying, a shotgun nearly identical to the others appeared in my hand, complete with its ammunition. I tested it. When it fired, there was even a faint, realistic recoil. "Fuck. Is this thing actually real?" I became excited instantly. "You just fixed it," Ava said softly. "Don't be so impatient from now on." I nodded. If I weren't impatient, this piece of junk probably wouldn't last until tomorrow. Michelle's mouth twitched into a small smile when she heard that. "You sure know how to talk." I leaned against the wall and smiled. "I'm not that good at it. I just want to stay alive." The carriage began to get busy. Everyone started redistributing gear and checking for gaps. I noticed some of the girls growing anxious. They seemed to realize we might not be the only survivors. Some had even begun to suspect that this train was not the safe zone everyone imagined, but something far more dangerous. Have you ever wondered why we're in this carriage? Ava suddenly spoke, her tone somewhat low. I was taken aback for a moment, then laughed and said, I have thought about it. But that sounds too crazy. This car isn't meant to transport people, she said, staring at me. It's meant to store things. I frowned. You mean we're trapped in this carriage not to stay alive, but because we're storing something? She nodded. Exactly. This is our last stronghold, and it's also the gateway to controlling the whole world. A chill ran through me. But more than that, I felt excitement. I finally understood that this train wasn't an ordinary vehicle. It was a key to some forgotten apocalyptic secret. Then we have to find a way out, I said. Go out. Michelle looked at me, her expression turning serious. Are you crazy? This carriage is our shelter, didn't move. I just want to go out. I grinned. I'm done living. Ava looked at me, her expression complicated. Are you sure you want to do this? I nodded. I have to be sure it's the path I chose. The corners of her mouth lifted slightly, as if smiling at me. But in that moment I felt she was also smiling at this apocalyptic journey. I leaned against the wall, gripping the replica shotgun, my gaze steady. The train kept moving forward, and I knew this journey had only just begun. The train roared through the night. The scene outside the window looked like an end-of-world poster chart sky, burning buildings, and countless fleeing figures. We were locked in this carriage, like beasts driven to the edge of a cliff. I leaned against the wall, holding that replica shotgun. But my eyes were not on the gun. They were trying to decipher Ava's words. This carriage is not the destination, she said softly, her voice as calm as the wind yet carrying a certain weight. It is the starting point. I raised an eyebrow. You mean we're at the beginning? So the train I boarded this time is it the original one or a new one? She didn't answer, only kept adjusting her gear. I could see her fingers tremble slightly when they touched certain things, as if recalling something, and as if resisting something. You're wavering. I couldn't help but say. She turned to stare at me, a trace of mockery and a touch of bewilderment in her eyes. You've never wavered. I shrugged. I'm the only one among you who hasn't been treated as an outsider. That's something to be proud of. You're not an outsider. Michelle interjected at that moment. You want to stay alive, so you've never taken the wrong path. I fell silent. That remark shook me a little. But more than that, it put me on guard. I began to realize that everyone in this carriage was trying to guess who I really was and what I would bring. They were like a pack of hunters watching a wildcat that might be hiding secrets. I decided to take the initiative. I opened the system and entered a new command, duplicate system. In an instant, my whole body tingled as if an electric current were flowing beneath my skin. Then a series of data began to appear in my mind. They were like fragments of some memory. What I saw were not weapons or clothes, but a train full of girls. A man confined in a corner, women surrounding him to inspect him, the system operating in their hands, trying to control the situation. I froze. Ava tried to come closer, but stopped halfway, a flash of shock in her eyes. Michelle lunged straight at me, grabbing my wrist with a grip so strong it felt like she might crush me. What did you do? She hissed through her teeth. I didn't answer. I just looked down at the circle of blue light on my wrist, the system's energy flowing. What did you copy? She asked. I copied the system. I frowned. I don't even understand what the system is, but I know it can replicate. She let go, her expression growing complicated. She seemed to be weighing something, but in the end she gave a soft sigh, as if she'd made a decision. Then you must understand. Her voice was low. The system is not a toy for you to copy clothes and food with. It is a key, a tool to change your fate. I narrowed my eyes. You mean it's my weapon? More dangerous than a weapon? She said. It can make you stronger than us, but it can also turn you all into me. I looked at her and suddenly realized that when she smiled earlier, it had been a warning. I don't know why I wanted to copy the system, maybe because I wanted to survive. Maybe because I really saw something. But in any case, this carriage was no longer a haven. It had become a battlefield. I have to try more, I said softly. Ava seemed to hear something. She hurried over and dragged me into a corner. Don't move. What you copy might not be what you think. I looked back at her, my expression making her uneasy. Are you afraid I'll copy something stronger than you? She didn't deny it, just said softly. I just wanted to make sure you wouldn't mess everything up. Mess up? I laughed. I nearly messed up the whole system. She didn't speak, just stared at me for a few seconds, then turned and left. I stood there stunned, but I didn't feel much unease. Instead, a strange confidence began to spread through me. The system was gradually revealing its true power, and I was finally no longer the one being forced to adapt. I began to wonder how I had ended up in this carriage. Maybe I had long been abandoned by ordinary people, yet picked by the system to become a true survivor of the apocalypse. Just as I was lost in thought, the sound of hurried footsteps came from the far end of the car. Then a figure burst in, holding a handgun, her face streaked with mud. We're surrounded. Her voice was almost a cry. I looked up and saw Tessa Reyes, a tall, sharp-eyed former Special Forces soldier. She was panting, a hint of despair on her face. Help me, she whispered. This is their third wave of attack. I stood up immediately. I can help you. Don't think I'm a useless person in this carriage. She looked at me, a flash of surprise in her eyes. You can really replicate. I nodded. I just copied the system 1 seats with me now. She stopped speaking, swiftly dragged me into a corner, and handed me a gun. We have to get out of here before they find a breakthrough. Michelle didn't stop me. Instead, she looked down and gave an order. Put your gear on and follow me. Ava followed as well, a faint, barely noticeable expectancy in her eyes. I could feel that they didn't completely trust me. But they couldn't deny the possibilities I brought. The train's lights went out for a moment. The carriage plunged into darkness, and only a single gunshot pierced the silence. This is their signal, Tessa whispered. They're coming in. We immediately hid in the corner of the carriage. And I held the gun across my chest, a surge of unprecedented confidence rising in me. Maybe I wasn't an ordinary man. I was someone chosen by fate. Someone who could always place himself at the center of the storm. When the lights came back on, I saw a woman in black standing in the doorway, a sniper rifle in her hands. Her eyes were cold and merciless, as if she intended to kill us all. Move, I shouted. The moment arrived. I lunged at the woman with the shotgun I had just duplicated in my hand. The gun went off. And for an instant I felt like a cheetah, seizing the opportunity and striking with precision. The bullet tore through her arm. She staggered and dropped her pistol. She looked at me with a trace of unwillingness in her eyes. You fired, she said. Breathing hard. I already did. I grinned. I can copy, so I'm not afraid of them. Michelle looked at me, a hint of approval flashing in her eyes. She murmured, You're the craziest person I've ever seen. I smiled but said nothing. I knew this was more than just surviving. It was a new game. I had to get crazier if I wanted to be the last one standing in this world. I rested my finger on the shotgun trigger. Every muscle taut. This carriage was no longer a simple refuge, but a battlefield sealed by the apocalypse. Every second could be the difference between life and death. But I was no longer passive as before. I had a system. I had weapons. And most importantly, I had resolve. You really dared to make a move. The woman slowly rose, a dagger in her hand. But the murderous intent that had been there earlier was gone from her eyes. You fight well. I shoved a gun in front of her, sneering. Am I better at shooting? Or are you? If you can catch 2 bullets from me, I'll immediately turn the muzzle on you. She didn't respond, only slowly bent to pick up the pistol from the ground, a trace of appraisal in her eyes. I realized she wasn't planning to go all out against me. She wanted to see just how strong I really was. You are actually the same as us, she suddenly said, her tone becoming complicated. We're all people chosen. I was taken aback for a moment. What do you mean? This train, she said, isn't for transporting people. It's for sorting. We were assigned to this carriage because we qualified to live. I leaned against the wall, breathing hard. You mean, I was chosen too? She nodded. You were the last person to arrive here, but the system selected you. I looked down at the blue halo on my wrist, a ripple stirring in my chest. So I hadn't run into this carriage. I had been on this train from the start. I just hadn't realized it. Then why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked. She let out a soft sigh. We didn't know either. I stared at her, a hint of doubt in my eyes. Why did you come to me? Because you have the ability to replicate, she said. It's the only hope. I was momentarily stunned. Everyone in this carriage was waiting for some kind of Terminator to appear, and I was that Terminator. So, you were waiting for me, she nodded, a trace of complex emotion in her eyes. Do you think this is a coincidence? I smiled, though the smile lacked much confidence, and was instead filled with an unprecedented calm. I'm just an ordinary person, but the system gave me a chance. An ordinary person. Michelle stood up from the corner, her voice low. You are the only one who can duplicate the system. That is not being ordinary. I looked at her, and that replica in my mind began to operate on its own. I realized the system was more than just copying things. It was constantly evolving. And it had even begun to take away part of my consciousness. What are you talking about? I asked in a low voice. This is not duplication, she said. This is fusion. You are no longer yourself. I suddenly felt a chill. If what she said was true, then I was no longer who I used to be. So, on your experiment. She didn't answer directly, just stared at me. You are still you. Only you have a new possibility. I frowned. I need time to think. Ava put her hand on my shoulder, her voice low. There's no time. You must decide immediately. I nodded, already starting to think. If this train really is a selection ground, then the other girls who weren't chosen would have been sacrificed. And I might be an exception. Then I'm the only one who can survive until the end. I asked tentatively. Michelle looked at me, a trace of pain in her eyes. You're not the only one. You're one of them. I was taken aback. Then I smiled. So you plan to survive the apocalypse with me? She said nothing. She simply drew her dagger slowly and thrust it into a tactical case. That case held our gear and our hope of survival. You can't be sure, she said softly. I'm sure, I said, slapping the table. I'm not sure what I am, but I know I have hope. She nodded, a hint of hesitation in her voice. You can find our real target outside. I stood up and looked at those girls. Each of them was waiting for me to make a decision, and I finally realized that the people in this carriage were my true teammates. Now, I grinned. We need to see where this car actually leads. Ava, hearing this, showed a flicker of unease in her eyes. Are you sure you want to push this car all the way to the end? I was sure, I replied, because this wrecked car isn't the end, it's the beginning. A low rumbling came from the distance, as if the whole vehicle were accelerating. I looked down at the shotgun in my hands and felt a surge of confidence I had never known before. Come on, I said softly, let's see what I can actually replicate. The train's lights suddenly flickered violently, and the entire carriage descended into chaos. I saw someone outside trying to break in, while Michelle and Ava quickly organized themselves, as if waiting for my command. I took a deep breath, my gaze hardening. We have to go. Now. No one spoke, but everyone moved. We were like beasts driven to the edge of a cliff, ready to face the final challenge of the end. I tightened my grip on the gun, a strange impulse rising in me. I was no longer the man who survived on luck alone. I was a choice. A deliberate choice with a plan and a purpose. The train began to accelerate, and I saw the distant scenery gradually blur. But my thoughts grew clearer. I started to understand that this carriage was not just a refuge, but a starting point, a key to the truth of the apocalypse. System, I said softly, I'm going to rewrite my life completely. At that moment, the system suddenly emitted a loud prompt. Warning, system merging. Immediate action recommended. I laughed. But there was a touch of madness in that smile. I like prompts like that. We burst out of the carriage and stepped into an unknown street. I saw a figure standing in the distance, holding a gun, but there was a hint of expectation in their eyes. I'm about to begin, I whispered, and in that moment I knew clearly that the life of this carriage had only just begun. We rushed out of the carriage and were met by a blaze and clouds of smoke. Buildings burned in the distance. The streets were littered with wreckage and corpses, and the air was thick with the acrid smell of burning. Time had reached some critical point. The last carriage of the doomsday train was like a window, opening the door to an unknown world. Don't get too close. Michelle grabbed my arm. You're the only one who knows what this car is really for. Don't be a fool anymore. I turned to look at her. There was no fear in my eyes, only calm. I leaned on her shoulder and said softly, this car is just the beginning. You've been looking for me. And you've been looking for a long time. She froze for a moment, then let go of my hand and stood in front of me. Her gaze held a complicated emotion, as if acknowledging me and as if wary of me at the same time. You're right, she said slowly. We've been waiting for you, waiting for someone who can open the box. I nodded. What about the box? In the 8th carriage, she said. But you'll have to get through the first gate first. I frowned. The first gate? What gate? You have to fight the group outside the door. Ava stepped forward, holding a pistol. They're the last batch. They haven't had time to confront us yet. I leaned against the wall and looked at her. You mean, they can replicate too? She nodded. It's not copying. It's being filtered by the system. Like us. They were also the chosen ones. I suddenly had a strange feeling, as if behind every door in this carriage hid another version of me, all abandoned like me, but crazier than I had imagined. They are not your enemies, I said softly. They are your companions. But you missed them. Michelle did not answer. She simply looked up toward the distance, where that group of men was steadily closing in on us. They wore shabby protective suits, gripped rusty firearms, but their eyes held an indomitable fighting spirit. We have to go, she said. Or you'll die. I nodded, but in my mind I was already planning. I can't leave yet. I have to try their gear first. Ava looked at me strangely. You plan to copy their weapons? Don't remind me, I said with a bitter smile. I already copied a shotgun. And that jacket. This isn't for fun, it's survival. She didn't speak anymore, just stood silently to the side, watching my movements. I stepped forward, picked up a gun, and then entered the system command. Copy. In an instant, I felt a force surge within me, as if my body was being redefined. When I looked back at the weapon in my hand, the gun was exactly the same as theirs, even bearing their firearm serial number. Damn. Well done. I raised the corner of my mouth and said to them. They didn't respond, only standing quietly in the distance, waiting for my next move. I knew this challenge would determine whether I could truly become their helper, and even their leader. We have to keep moving, I said softly. As long as we don't die, we still have a chance. Michelle nodded, then said, You're the only one now who can get us out of here. I smiled. You were waiting for me, and I'd been waiting for you too. We began moving toward the 8th car, and the men started to pursue us. I knew that if they really wanted to live, they should have joined forces with us instead of fighting, but I didn't want to give them that chance. I ran while pulling up the system, beginning to copy their weapons, bullets, firearms. Even their combat skills started to appear in my system. I suddenly realized that copying wasn't just duplicating a piece of equipment, but duplicating all of them. I'm not just copying weapons, I shouted as I ran. I'm taking advantage. Ava stopped in her tracks. a flicker of surprise in her eyes. Are you crazy? You copied their skills. I'm not crazy, I said, turning back to her with a smile. I just know the truth. I turned around and began to fight back using my copying skill. The group of men started to unravel when they saw me, someone who could copy them. How does your system even work? One of them roared. Your system is what's killing you, I replied coldly. In that moment, I felt like a lion, using their own weapons to tear apart their own world. We rushed into the 8th car, which was filled with all kinds of equipment. Like a doomsday tech research institute, Michelle said softly. This is their base. I nodded and looked at the group of girls on the playground. They wore different outfits and held different weapons, but their eyes were all full of anticipation. They were waiting for me. Waiting for the changes brought by the replication system. Ava walked over and said quietly, in this car, there is something we don't need to replicate. I was instantly on alert. What is it? A portal, she said. It's the center of the whole incident. The thing all of you have been waiting for. I looked down at the system and found it was gradually analyzing all the devices in the carriage, as if searching for the location of that portal. How did you know? I stared at her intently. I've seen it, she whispered, but I don't want you to see it again. I leaned against the wall, a flicker of determination in my eyes. I don't want you to see it again, unless it can take us away. Michelle leaned toward me and said, Can you replicate the portal? I shook my head. I don't know, but I'll try. She smiled. Then let's take a gamble. At that moment, I decided to take the risk. I brought up the system and entered the command copy portal. Almost instantly, I felt a powerful force surge from the system, as if it wanted to tear my consciousness apart. What are you doing? Ava exclaimed. I'm gambling with my life, I said softly. Suddenly, the entire carriage shook. The portal began to activate, and a powerful electromagnetic wave rose from beneath the ground, as if sucking all of us into an unknown world. Is this the portal? I asked, astonished. Looking at it. At least part of it, Michelle said. But you may have copied more than you think. I looked down at the system and found its designation had changed to CH01. Only then did I realize I had not only copied the portal, I had copied the system itself. I really did copy myself in. I whispered. Ava walked over and reached out as if to touch me. Who exactly are you? I smiled. I'm the only one who can get you out of this carriage. She didn't speak. She just looked at me, a complicated emotion flickering in her eyes. I'm not sure, I admitted. But I know I have to go down that path. The portal slowly opened, a pale blue light spilling from within and illuminating each of our faces. I stepped forward and whispered, This is the end, and also the beginning. Then I stepped into the portal, embracing the unknown journey toward the end of days. The portal's energy surged like a tide. I felt myself being pulled by an invisible force. Ava rushed over and grabbed my arm, trying to drag me back. Don't go in, you have no idea what that is. I know. I looked up at her. I already know its name. A flicker of doubt crossed her eyes, but in the end she let go of my hand. I knew she wasn't worried about me, but about how the whole thing would unfold. We were standing at the same starting point. But perhaps she wasn't ready to accept me. When the light completely engulfed my body, I felt a dizzying sensation, as if thrown into a gigantic machine. When I opened my eyes, I found myself standing in a strange city. The sky was still dark, but the air was filled with a vitality I had never experienced before. You're still alive. Michelle stood in front of me, a hint of doubt and surprise in her eyes. I just moved to another spot. I shrugged. This carriage might already be ruined. She didn't respond, only lowered her head to look at me, a complex expression on her face. I knew she was probably wondering whether I had really become one of them, a partner, rather than a zombie parasitically living in their lives. We have to go. Ava walked over, holding a new weapon that looked like an old sniper rifle but felt unusually heavy in her hands. This isn't an ordinary gun. Not an ordinary gun, I said softly. This is your language. She froze for a moment, then smiled. You can speak now. I'm not talking nonsense. I waved my hand. I mean, I can really copy. We began to step forward, walking down an empty street. There wasn't a sound around us, only the sound of my feet striking the ground. Tessa was ahead, her face showing a weariness she'd never had before. But her movements were more precise than ever. You're not the only one who can copy, she suddenly said, a hint of impatience in her tone. You must have copied other things, too. I sneered coldly. I copied all of your hopes. She stared at me, a trace of doubt in her eyes. You don't really think this is a game, do you? I'm not playing, I answered. I'm fighting for a chance to stay alive. Ava looked at me, a flash of astonishment crossing her face. You mean you've already finished the copying? I forced it out of me, I said defiantly. I wasn't chosen. I only got stronger because I was driven to the brink. The expression on her face was a little stiff, as if she was digesting the information. Tessa just frowned, as if judging whether my words were believable. I don't care whether you believe me, I said. I only care whether I can survive to see tomorrow. Michelle came over, a trace of pity in her eyes. You should be planning to leave here alive. I intend to leave here alive, I replied. My tone no longer restless or impatient but carrying a calm confidence. No matter what this place is, I'll come out alive. I walked ahead, relying only on instinct to judge the direction. The streets had once been strewn with corpses. Now there were only a few left. As if the fires of the apocalypse had not died out in our carriage, but continued to burn in another area. Do you know where this is? Ava suddenly asked, a hint of uncertainty in her voice. I shook my head, as if telling myself, I don't know. But I know I have to find out. Tessa walked over and stood to the side watching my movements. Your duplication system is even more powerful than we imagined. Yeah, I replied with a smile. I've already come to see it as part of me. Michelle lowered her voice at that moment. We have to hurry. This carriage might already be gone. I nodded. But in my mind I had already planned the next steps. I no longer wanted to live in their shadow, nor did I intend to let them control my fate again. We have to find that portal, I said. It might still be somewhere. Or someone may have already found it. Ava frowned. Are you talking about somewhere else? Or that you've already found it yourself? I was silent for a few seconds, then said softly, I found it. And I think it's more dangerous than we imagine. Her expression turned dangerous in an instant. You mean it would kill us? It's not killing. It's going to change us, I replied. It's not a portal, it's the playground of another world. Michelle gave me a surprised look, as if reevaluating my ideas. Are you crazy? I'm not crazy, I answered. I understand. We started walking toward the ruins. It was the only place that could give us answers. As we walked I murmured, I'm no longer the man you abandoned. Ava suddenly stopped, a trace of gravity appearing on her face. Have you already copied your consciousness? I was stunned for a moment, then smiled. I'm not copying consciousness. I'm copying reality. Then you shouldn't be speaking in your own language, she said coldly. You should use your language. Think like you do? I looked up at her, a hint of defiance in my eyes. Then I'll use your language. But I'm not going to be afraid of you. She didn't argue further. She just quietly followed behind me. I knew she had decided to let me live. But she also understood that I might truly become their greatest threat. And in that moment, I knew clearly that the truth of the apocalypse might be darker than we imagined. I kept walking. The floor tiles beneath my feet were already cracked, and a faint blue light leaked from the holes. The blue glow felt like some kind of signal, like traces left by the doomsday train. A chill suddenly ran through me, as if the whole world were watching. And I was the only one brave enough to face the end. You really think this carriage is the end? Ava suddenly spoke, a note of puzzlement in her voice. She was probably wondering whether this man could truly become one of them, or was just a bastard good at exploiting the system. I'm not the destination. I'm the starting point, I shot back. I proved my worth with this carriage. Michelle's expression suddenly grew complicated, as if weighing whether I truly had the right to stand before them. Who are you exactly? Whose replica are you? I stopped, looked at her, a cold smile curling my lips. I'm no one's replica. I am myself. She didn't speak again, only narrowed her eyes, as if scrutinizing every word I said. I knew she wasn't doubting me so much as confirming each of my choices. She had gotten used to the game between us, but this time, I really did seem to be no longer the person she had thought weak. You seem to know a lot about my system, I said suddenly, my tone carrying a hint of probing. Did you know all along that it would choose me? Tessa walked over, producing a newly copied metal dagger from behind her back, impatience in her voice. Don't overthink it. This is no joke. I'm not joking. I shook my head. I just want an answer. She gave my dagger a cold glance, as if sizing up my strength. You're stronger than us now. I'm not stronger, I said softly. I'm another version. Ava now slowly approached me, as if probing my thoughts. Have you already merged with the system? I looked up, my gaze steady. I was chosen by it, not controlled by it. She paused for a moment, then smiled. But there was no triumph in that smile. Rather, it was like someone watching a person about to reveal the truth. You let the system live through you. I didn't just make the system live on my hands, I replied. I made it live in all of us. Michelle looked at us, a flash of shock in her eyes. It seemed she finally understood that none of us are independent individuals. We are all parts of the system, selected by it and brought into this world. And we, in this moment, became parts of one another. I didn't come to live, I continued. I came to change. Who? Are you saying that to encourage us? Tessa asked, frowning. I'm not encouraging, I replied. I'm telling you that we all have the same chance. Ava walked over, her voice low. Have you already copied everything? I nodded, a trace of confidence I'd never had before in my eyes. Yes, I copied everything, your hopes, your fears, and your futures. Her gaze turned dangerous. Then don't mess it up. I grinned. I can wreck it, and I can rebuild it. Michelle didn't say anything else. She just stood to the side, as if waiting for me to make the final choice. I knew she wasn't waiting for me, but for the system's answer. We have to find that ship, I said suddenly. That spaceship is the end of all this. What are you talking about? Ava asked, puzzled. I'm saying this carriage is only a transfer station to the future. The real destination is that spaceship, I said slowly. If it's still there. Tessa's expression suddenly turned serious. Are you insane? That spaceship isn't the destination we imagined, but it's definitely our chance. I replied. If the system really intends to take us out, it must be for some spaceship. We began heading toward the harbor, the only place that could be hiding that ship. The streets still reeked of apocalypse, the air carrying a mingled scent of metal and dust. I knew that with every step. It could be the last. Have you ever thought, I murmured as I walked, that each of us is the fuel for this ship? Ava's expression instantly went cold. Have you lost your way? I'm not lost, I replied. I've just found my direction. Michelle finally spoke up as well. Don't say direction again. Don't make everything sound so sacred. I'm not some sacred being, I retorted coldly. I just want to live. We walked step by step into the harbor, a place full of chaos and the unknown. I saw the sea burning in the distance, as if the whole world were being devoured by the apocalypse. And in my system, the data began to clarify, as if telling me one thing. The end of the portal might not be an end at all, but a new world. I finally understand, I said softly. This carriage is not just a vehicle. It's a key. Ava stopped and looked at me, a trace of complexity in her eyes. Have you already copied the key? I copied everything that needed copying, I answered, including the future. Michelle's voice came from behind. So how do you plan to use it? I leaned against the wall, looking out at the sea in the distance, and said softly, I'm going to make it take us to a real world. Tessa walked over then as well, sneering at me. Do you think you're a hero? I'm not a hero, I replied. I'm just staying alive. In that moment, I realized I was no savior, no world-changing guy. I was merely copying my fate, copying this apocalyptic world, copying a real future. I've already copied, I whispered, my voice seeming to carry some kind of power. What? Ava stared at me intently. I copied another possibility, I said slowly. One that isn't controlled by you. Her eyes turned dangerous. Then you better not let that possibility hurt us. I smiled. I don't want to hurt you. I just want to survive. Michelle stood beside me, a trace of worry in her voice. You're insane. I'm not crazy. I smiled. I've awakened. We kept moving forward to the end of the harbor. The spacecraft lay quietly sunk under the water, like a forgotten stone, and we stood around it like a group of people waiting for fate. Are you sure you want to go down? Ava asked softly. I'm sure, I answered. I'm no longer the one you chose. Her expression grew complicated, as if assessing whether I was truly worth the risk. Aren't you afraid of dying? I'm not planning to die. I gave a resolute smile. I intend to survive. To watch all of you, Michelle finally said in a low voice. You have to be certain about one thing. What? I asked. You're not copying fate, she said. You're changing it. I looked down at the gun in my hand, a hint of resolve in my eyes. I'm not intending to change it. I'm going to become a part of it. For a moment, I felt as if an invisible force was pushing me that way. I walked toward the spaceship, as if toward my own future, and that ship might be the only place that can take us out of this apocalyptic world. I have finally found the answer, I whispered. Are you ready? Ava asked. I nodded, a faint smile appearing at the corner of my mouth. I'm ready. Together we took the final step toward the hatch of the spaceship. I knew this was not just an ordinary mission, but a turning point in my life. I used to be a man thrown onto an apocalyptic train, but now I am someone with a system, the master of my own fate. And this was only the beginning. The sight of the harbor jolted me. Night draped the entire sea. Dozens of corpses floated on the surface, like a group of ghosts sunk beneath the waves. In the distance, a few wrecked ships burned, the flames lighting every one of our faces. Ava stood at the front, her expression steely, a trace of unease not belonging to her in her eyes. Michelle leaned against the corner of the wall, fingers lightly tapping the gun at her hip, like a warrior waiting for orders. Are you sure this ship is still alive? I asked softly, my tone a little hesitant. It isn't, Michelle answered quietly. But it used to be. I looked at the ship. It lay sleeping quietly in the storm, like a forgotten machine. I suddenly realized that the ship might not be a miracle at all, but part of a much larger plan. So you all knew we would come here already? I turned to Ava, a note of doubt in my voice. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, looking down at the weapon in her hands, the sniper rifle's body was already covered in cracks, but its support still held. We didn't know, she finally said. We only knew this was the end point. End point. I frowned. Are you saying this ship is the place where all of us will be sacrificed? This ship is your future, she said coldly. It's not the end point. It's just a beginning. I leaned against the wall, my fingers unconsciously gripping the replicated shotgun, and I said softly, then my starting point isn't here. I was in the carriage. You're right. She looked up at me, a hint of complexity in her eyes. You're not one of us. You're the one chosen by the system. I gave a short laugh. I think I'm the only one who can truly change this situation. Michelle spoke up then. What exactly did you replicate? I pondered for a moment, then slowly said, I copied all of your hopes and fears. Her eyes instantly turned dangerous. You mean to control our future? I'm not controlling, I replied. I just want to be the last one alive. As we spoke, a low rumbling came from the distance. As if something was approaching. They found us. Tessa whispered, a hint of exhaustion on her face. Those men weren't waiting for us, they were chasing us. I slapped my thigh. Fuck. This isn't the escape we imagined. This is a real showdown. Ava frowned. How do you plan to get out of this? If you don't want to be caught by them. Don't talk nonsense. I took a deep breath, my gaze steadying. I don't intend to be caught. I'm going to follow my own path. Just as we were about to leave, Michelle suddenly stopped and said softly, Are you sure you want to do this? I know I'm sure, I replied. The system is already running in my hands, and I don't want to be a bystander anymore. She sighed. Then don't regret it. I didn't answer, just lowered my head, looking at the shotgun in my hands as if confirming its weight. Listen, I raised my head and said in a hoarse voice. Whatever this ship is, it is the bridge connecting you and me. I don't want to be your enemy, but I don't want to be controlled by you anymore. Ava's eyes flashed with surprise. Are you saying you're no longer the fool who was thrown into this carriage? I'm not a fool, I sneered. I just don't want to be a waste of opportunity anymore. She didn't speak further, only stepped closer and said softly, Your replication system. Does it really only replicate? It doesn't just replicate, I replied. It selects. It makes me stronger. Tessa interjected at that moment. Have you already copied all the possibilities? I copied all the possibilities that let me stay alive, I answered, including your expectations. Michelle's expression grew complicated, as if considering whether I truly understood the rules of this world. You're right, she finally said. You're like a variable we've been waiting for. I leaned against the wall, looking at each of them as if weighing every glance. If this ship can really take us to a new world, I won't let it become a death trap. Ava's mouth tilted up slightly. You're finally starting to think clearly. I already have, I said softly. I just haven't told you. We continued forward, toward the sleeping ship. I knew that with every step we took we were approaching an unknown future. This wasn't the end of the world, but a new beginning. You're wrong, Michelle said suddenly. This ship wasn't prepared for you. It was prepared for me. I stared, narrowing my eyes. You mean this ship is a prototype? Yes, she nodded. It's the key to the whole system. It can open the door to true freedom. I leaned against the wall and looked at her, a trace of thought in my eyes. Did you already duplicate this ship? You only copied it, she said coldly. You are the future of this ship. My fingers tightened on the gun without thinking. I felt like a real warrior. I was no longer a passive hitchhiker waiting for fate. I was someone who could make choices. Then I won't wait any longer, I said. I'm going to follow my own path. Ava came over, a hint of disbelief in her eyes. Are you really willing to take that risk? I didn't answer. Instead, I looked up at the ship, as if confirming my choice. I will, because it's the only way I can survive. Michelle didn't say anything more. She just stood there, as if consenting to my decision. We have to go, I said softly. This ship isn't our destination. It is our fate. We took the final step toward that slumbering ship, and I knew this was only the beginning. The surface of the sea rippled in layers in the dark, like death whispering. We moved along the road to the harbor, every second feeling like a race against death. The footsteps of the men in black drew nearer and nearer, as if chasing us, and we seemed to have become the last participants in this apocalyptic game. They're coming, Tessa said beside me, her voice low and calm. Aren't you going to decide how you're going to stay alive? I tightened my grip on the shotgun in my hands, my knuckles whitening from the pressure. I knew that if we didn't act, they would, like hunters, drag us into the abyss one by one. Not an end, but a reset. I don't want to be one of those people anymore, I said softly. I want to live as a different version. Ava stood at the front, a trace of vigilance in her eyes. Don't speak. Don't provoke them. I smiled. I can tell you're all waiting for me to make a choice. But this time, I'm speaking not to provoke, but to stay alive. Your replication system has finally started sending signals, she asked softly. Yes, I replied. It has crossed the boundary of the carriage. And now it's beginning to tell me things I shouldn't know. Michelle stepped closer, her eyes carrying a trace of reproach and a hint of relief. You finally began to realize who you are. I am who I am. I lifted my head and stared into her eyes. But my consciousness is no longer what you imagine it to be. Her gaze grew complicated, as if weighing whether I still had a chance to become the variable she needed. Don't you have any other plans? She lowered her voice, a note of warning in her tone. This ship is not the miracle you see. It is the terminus of the entire system. I snorted. An end. The bullets I fired just now left marks on that ship's hull. That's not an end. That's a new beginning. You're saying this is not the end. Tessa frowned. But that ship is the end. Because it is the bridge to the new world. Then I'll cross that bridge too, I said coldly. Only, I'm not going to be a Galliflow pushover anymore. Ava seemed moved by my words. A flicker of hesitation crossed her eyes. Have you already copied everything? I nodded, a trace of depth in my eyes. I've copied everything that can keep me alive, including your futures. Then who exactly are you? She asked, a note of unwillingness in her tone. It's me, I answered. Only, I'm stronger than you now. Michelle's expression began to stiffen. She seemed to realize that this time I might truly no longer be the pliable transport she'd wielded. She said softly, "You've taken control of the system." "I didn't control it. I picked it up," I answered. "And its power is no longer what you imagine." A low, humming sound came from afar. Like some kind of machine powering up. The sound grew closer, as if the whole ship were waking. "They found the portal," Tessa said softly. "We have to hurry." Ava immediately glanced back at me, as if weighing whether I truly had the ability to lead everyone out of this apocalypse. "You have to prove yourself." I raised my hand and said softly, "I already proved it, didn't I?" She didn't answer, only staring at me, her eyes carrying a complicated expectation. The night breeze swept by, lifting my tactical jacket, which now fit me perfectly, as if I had truly grown into it. I walked toward the door leading to the cabin, like a real warrior advancing fate. "I've replicated this ship," I said. "It's not the end. It's the key." Michelle looked at me, a flash of shock crossing her eyes. "Have you completed the mission already?" "Not yet," I replied, "but I know I'm on the right path." We stepped into the cabin, which was filled with all kinds of equipment, like a tech lab on a solitary island. The emergency lights gave off a faint glow, illuminating each of our faces. "How did you get in?" Ava asked, a note of suspicion in her voice. "I used the duplication system to get around their lockdown," I replied. "That's my talent." She turned to look at the projection device. The screen showed a complex coordinate map. "What does that represent?" "That represents where we can go," I said, pointing to a spot on the screen. "A real safe zone." Tessa looked at me as if scrutinizing every word. "Are you planning to take us there?" "I intend to get there alive," I replied, "not to be tossed into death's pocket by you." Michelle's expression grew serious. "Your ship, it revealed our position." "It didn't reveal our position," I answered. "It pointed us toward a possible future." In that moment, we were no longer just the people in the carriage. We became a real team, a team linked by the replication system. Everyone was fighting for that future. And I was no longer the person thrown into an apocalyptic world who survived only by luck. "I've already duplicated this ship," I said softly, "but I don't intend to duplicate all of you." Ava felt a wave of unease. "Are you saying you're going to let us die family by family?" I didn't answer, just looked at her. I knew this ship was no longer a mere transport. It was a symbol of some kind of awakening. It told me that duplication was not just copying weapons, but copying fate. "What exactly is this ship?" Michelle asked quietly. "It is a door," I replied. "A door to an unknown world." "Have you already copied that door?" she pressed. "I'm still copying," I answered, "because I don't know what's beyond it." "How do you plan to open it?" Tessa asked. I said slowly, "I'm going to use everything I have to open it." At that moment, I felt like someone who truly had power, no longer the guy who passively accepted fate. I can fight. I can battle. I can copy. I can become the most powerful one on the doomsday train. "I'm not copying people," I said quietly. "I'm copying hope. Copying the future," Michelle said softly. "Are you really ready?" "I am ready," I answered, "because it's not just my choice. It's the path I must take." We walked into the heart of the hull, where a massive machine stood like a monument to apocalyptic technology. Its light flickered continuously, as if waiting for some command. "Are you sure you want to activate it?" Ava asked, a trace of unease in her voice. "I'm sure," I replied. "Because it's not a ship. It's a miracle." I lowered my head to look at the system, reached out, and entered the commands. In an instant, the entire apparatus began to operate. Blue light surged from the machine like a heavenly thunderbolt, cleaving the clouds of the apocalypse. "You've opened the door," Michelle said quietly. "That is our future." I smiled. "I'm not going to watch the future, I'm going to create it." The blue light enveloped the entire cabin, like the beginning of a new world. Or the end of the apocalypse. And within that light, I seemed to see a farther world. A world without carriages, without systems, without an apocalypse. There, I could live freely, not as a human, but as my own power. "This carriage has completed its task," I said slowly. "And I am myself." At that moment, the translation system, it seemed, also acknowledged my identity. It was no longer a cold tool, but something able to understand my existence. "I am not the one you chose," I said softly. "I am my own destiny." Ava walked over, drew close to me, a hint of faded hope in her eyes. "Who exactly are you?" "I'm no one," I replied. "I'm simply someone who chose to keep living. This ship, this gun, this system, they're all witnesses to my choice. They tell me that my future isn't decided by others, but is a name I give it myself. I have become my own person," I said with a smile, "not a copied trump card." Michelle looked down at me as if she were looking at someone about to change the world. "I knew you would take this path," she said softly. "Your system chose you from the start." "Then stop using us as pawns," I answered. "Let us live, just let us live." In that instant, I felt as if a new realm had been opened within me. No longer an ordinary person bound to the fate of a train, but someone who could choose their own future. "I've changed," I said quietly. I'm no longer that fool thrown into a carriage. Tessa looked at me, a trace of respect in her eyes. You really have become someone who changes fate. I'm not changing fate. I whispered again. I'm duplicating my fate. In the light of this new world, I saw myself not the man who lived by luck anymore, but someone with purpose, with faith, with an identity. I'm not afraid of death. I raised my head, a note of resolve in my voice. I'm afraid of a death that isn't even worth it. The machine's light grew stronger and stronger, as if it were going to consume us. But I knew it was not merely devouring. It was opening. This carriage has reached its end, I said softly, and now, I will create a world of my own. We stood at the center of the portal, ready to face an unknown world, and I knew I was no longer the chosen one in the carriage, but someone who could truly determine their own fate. In that moment, I seemed to understand a cruel truth. In this apocalyptic world, the ones who survive to the end are not the strongest or the smartest, but those who dare to break the rules. I am the one who dares to break the rules. The portal's blue light still flickered, like a crack leading to a new world, but in that light, I saw a harsher truth. This ship, this train, and this whole world were all waiting for me to open it. Do you really want to open that door? Ava's voice had a trace of unease. Her fingers unconsciously tightened on the sniper rifle, as if afraid it would suddenly vanish from my hands. I don't want to open it. I leaned against the wall, my voice low. I have to open it. Michelle whispered at my side. Have you ever thought that this is not just a portal? It's a restart of time. A restart of time. I raised an eyebrow, a trace of sarcasm in my voice. Have you known all along that this carriage isn't an endpoint, but a loop? She didn't answer, only staring at me, a complex emotion in her eyes. She seemed to be wondering whether I truly grasped the nature of things. Tessa suddenly spoke up. Who exactly are you? Are you the system? Or are you just a copy person? I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I looked down at the blue halo on my wrist. The light no longer flickered but flowed like a stream, slowly running beneath my skin. I realized one thing. The system was gradually merging with my body. It was no longer an external weapon, but part of me. I am the system, I said slowly, my voice carrying a calm, resolute strength. It chose me, just as it chose all of you. Ava's pupils contracted, as if reassessing our situation. Aren't you saying you are no longer human? I'm not human anymore, I answered slowly, but I'm still me, only I've become stronger. Her voice trembled slightly. Have you already lost yourself? I smiled. My sense of self is even stronger than you imagine. Michelle grabbed my wrist, as if trying to stop something. Her tone held a trace of struggle. Are you really going to take this path? You know, once it's activated, there's no turning back. I nodded. I know, but I don't intend to turn back. At this moment, I felt the connection between myself and the system. It was not merely a tool, but more like my consciousness evolving, as if I were evolving. What I copied was not just weapons, but the possibilities of humanity, the hopes of the future, and some kind of unknown destiny. Your replication system is not just replication, Tessa said softly, her tone carrying a hint of awe. My system is the replication of my fate, I replied, and I chose to let it continue. Ava approached me. The coldness had left her gaze, replaced by a complex emotion. Do you feel like you've changed the whole world? I'm not changing the world, I answered. I'm closing in on the truth. In that moment, I felt like I was standing on the cliff of fate. All of us were waiting for an answer, and I had finally grasped it. I don't want to be that wreck thrown into this carriage anymore, I said softly. A flicker of doubt suddenly crossed Michelle's eyes. Do you think we're all being controlled by the system? We have all been controlled by the system, I nodded, but I don't intend to let the system control me. A low, rumbling sound came from afar, like some machine starting up, like fate drawing near. I knew we had no way back. Every step could determine whether we'd live to see tomorrow. Don't talk nonsense, Ava said through gritted teeth. What you need to do is choose the right path. I already have, I replied. The one that will let me survive. I reached out and entered the system command. Initiate replication protocol. Open the next waypoint. In an instant, the entire cabin began to tremble, the equipment lights flickering restlessly, as if the whole world held its breath, and I knew the system had begun to run. It was no longer a simple tool but a part of me, my future. Aren't you the one who's become the monster of this system? Tessa stepped closer to me, her voice edged with a hint of doubt and a touch of probing. I'm not a monster, I replied. I'm just closer to the truth, Michelle said softly. Are you trying to turn all of us into copies of yourself? I'm not trying to turn you into copies of me, I said calmly. I'm trying to let you truly live as yourselves, not as people chosen by the train, not as lingering echoes replicated by the system. Ava stood beside me. The coldness in her eyes finally showed a hint of wavering. Have you already seen through this whole thing? I'm not seeing through it, I said in a low voice. I was chosen by the system. The atmosphere in the cabin grew heavy, as if each of us realized that this moment was no longer just about escaping the carriage, but about choosing our own futures. Your system is no longer your tool. Tessa looked at me, her expression complex. It has become part of me, I answered. I am no longer a passive person. We stood before the portal, like travelers at a crossroads of fate. Behind each door could be an end, or it could be a new beginning. Then which one do we choose? Michelle whispered. I didn't answer. Instead, I took a deep breath. And the light in my eyes grew determined. I'll choose a place that will let us survive until the end. Ava came over and drew close to me, a trace of unease in her voice. Are you really going to do this? I don't know whether you're using us. I'm not using you, I replied. I consider you my companions, not bargaining chips. Tessa frowned at me, as if assessing whether I had truly changed. Have you copied our will? I'm not copied, I replied coldly. I chose. We didn't argue further. Instead, we stood silently before the portal, waiting for the moment it would open. I knew that this moment would decide whether we would survive, whether we could continue this story that belonged to us. I'm no longer the man who was thrown into the carriage, I said softly. You are now, Ava began softly. I am the key to this world. I interrupted her, my gaze carrying an unprecedented strength. The portal's light grew ever brighter, like a beam pushing us toward an unknown future. I felt an invisible force surging within me, as if the system were telling me, you are no longer the chosen one. You are the master of yourself. I'm leaving, I said, and my name was no longer given by others, but a choice of my own. Then don't regret it, Michelle said softly, because on this journey, there is no turning back. I didn't answer. I only smiled a cold and resolute smile. I won't regret it, I said, as the portal opened. A blinding wave of light enveloped us, pulling us into a new world, one that belonged neither to the train nor to the carriage. This is not the end. It is merely the beginning, and I am finally no longer the person who passively accepts fate. I am the one who breaks the rules. I am the one who has my own choice. I am the one who truly survived. A blue light tore reality apart, like an apocalyptic star about to descend. My body was pulled, like a slab ripped by time, falling into some unknown realm. Time seemed to freeze. The world tilted in an instant, and I was like a bullet shot into a battlefield of the future. When I opened my eyes, everything before me had changed. A vast wasteland stretched beneath our feet, the sky a polluted hue, thick like ink yet giving off a strange faint glow. This was not the end of the apocalypse, but some unknown restart. You really opened the portal. Ava walked over, a note of uncertainty in her voice. Her gaze swept around, as if confirming whether we had truly stepped into another world. I didn't open a portal, I said slowly, a trace of calm in my eyes. I broke the last wall. Michelle stood beside me, her fingers lightly rubbing the gun at her waist. Her usual vigilance and scorn seemed, in this moment, to have been replaced by some other emotion. Have you ever wondered what this place is? She asked softly, as if not asking us, but asking myself. I leaned against her, quietly watching her. In that moment, I felt that we were finally no longer just refugees in the carriage, but truly people who belonged to this journey. I don't know, I said, but I know that it no longer belongs to that doomsday train. Tessa pulled a newly copied knife from behind her, a trace of gravity in her eyes. Did you replicate the ending of the whole system? I didn't answer, instead lowering my head to look at the weapon in my hand. It was no longer a mere copy, but a wholly new existence. The feeling was as if I had truly become part of the system, rather than merely using it. I'm not copying, I said. I'm just absorbing it. Ava looked at me particularly, a trace of complexity in her eyes. She seemed to finally realize that the boundaries between us had blurred, no longer a simple me and them. Have you forgotten who you are? She asked softly. I don't remember who I am, I answered, but I remember that I can survive. Michelle murmured. Are you becoming some kind of strange being? I'm not strange, I said coldly. I'm evolving. I looked up at that wasteland, as if to confirm whether we had truly taken the final step. I knew we had left that doomsday train, left the compartment that had been our world alone, but at that moment, I was no longer the chosen one inside that car. I had become my own master. We have to go, I said quietly, as if urging everyone. This isn't the end, but another beginning. Ava came over and stood close to me, a note of hesitation in her voice. Do you really not want to get back on that train? I don't, I replied. I'm no longer the only one who can survive. Tessa stood off to the side, a thoughtful look in her eyes. Do you think the system chose all of us? You weren't chosen, I said slowly. You were the ones who survived. Michelle seemed to finally accept the fact. So how do you plan to go on? I leaned against the wall, determination flickering in my eyes. I'm not going to be thrown back into the wheel of fate. I'm going to a place that belongs to me. Ava said nothing more, but tightened her grip on the gun. Her expression grew complex, as if weighing every decision we had made. I know you're rewriting the ending, she said, but are you really planning to make all of this better? I looked down at myself, as if confirming every choice I had made. I don't have to promise anything. I just want to live longer than I imagined. We stood there on the wasteland, like people forced to change their fate. Every decision was a kind of betrayal of the past and a kind of promise to the future. Have you really copied everything? Michelle asked. I copied everything that could keep me alive, I said. Not just weapons, but hope as well. The distant sky began to shift, as if some force were calling us, and we finally broke free from that system's rhythm. Each of us began to move to our own pace. We have to find a new world, I said. That's where we'll live to the end. Ava seemed to nod, but there was still a trace of uncertainty in her eyes. In that wasteland, she had been waiting for me to regain the reason I had lost. But now I was no longer someone she could control. You've grown stronger, she said softly, but I still don't understand who exactly are you. I don't care who you are, I replied. I only care that you survive until the end. This journey was no longer merely an escape but a true exploration. We were no longer passengers on that train. We had become new faces of this world. I took a deep breath once more. As if to confirm I was ready. I have completely replicated the fate of this carriage, I said, and it, at last, is not our destination, Michelle whispered. So what are you planning to do? I don't know, I answered, but I know this was never a simple ending. Tessa finally spoke too, with a note of respect in her voice. So did you also replicate something stronger? I copied a new possibility, I sneered. It might be crazier than you imagine, but it could also be our only option. We didn't argue anymore. Because everyone had already realized that we were no longer one person, but a whole. We were no longer the person chosen by the system, but someone who could control it. I don't want to wait for others to give me a chance anymore, I said. I want to create my own. Ava looked at me as if studying an entirely new being. Then don't make me regret it, I laughed. I won't let you regret it. I will only make you want to keep living. We continued forward across that wasteland, no longer bound by the fate of the doomsday train, but becoming masters of our own destiny. I didn't know where we would ultimately end up, but I knew I would not live as I had before. I would live like a real person. Today I finally understand, I whispered. I am the master of this world. We faced that unknown sky and took steps that belonged to us. This was not just an escape, but a true rebirth. Every replication, every choice, was my most honest resistance against the apocalypse. I am not the chosen one, I whispered. I am the one who copies his own fate. And in that moment, I finally understood a cruel truth. In this apocalyptic world, the only one who can survive is not the luckiest person, but the one who dares most to break the rules. I am the one who broke the rules. I stood on that wasteland. Beneath my feet a land bathed in blue light, the air thick with a strange energy. I once thought the copying system was merely a tool, a means to keep me alive on the apocalypse train, but now I know clearly that it has become part of my body, and part of my very existence. I turned to look at the girls beside me, and the thousands of words in my heart finally condensed into a simple gesture. I reached out and placed my hand on Ava's shoulder. She paused, the severity in her eyes melting away bit by bit, as if awakened by some long dormant feeling. In this world, I no longer have to accept those choices. I no longer have to follow the rhythm of that doomsday train. My fate is my own. My name is no longer a number chosen by some system, but a real existency, a person who can have feelings, a story, and a future. And that's a wrap, folks. If this story gave you that sweet dopamine hit and was more satisfying than peeling the plastic off a brand new TV, do me a massive favor. Obliterate that like button and hit subscribe. I'm locked in the content mine, serving up fresh, ridiculously satisfying stories every single day. See you tomorrow for your next fix.